find balance. Yeah, find balance in everything you're doing. And that's probably one of the best advice I can give, because that's not a popular one, but most of the time that's a really efficient one.
What if you turn hardship into greatness, anger into serenity? Everything changes. Make your life a masterpiece. Welcome, I'm Yannick, your host, and now joining me, Jeremie Mani. Jeremie Mani is the co-founder of Podcasthon and also is the co-founder of a non-profit organization called All Truth. And he also is an entrepreneur. When he first went to his exchange to Michigan in the United States of America in the 1990s, he really discovered the World Wide Web, got inspired, and then started his first company with 5 other partners, and then ultimately sold it about in 2007 for $33 million, and then became the president for 10 years for Netinho, and ultimately went to Montreal, became there the CEO of WebHelp, and now he is here on the show, and I'm so excited to talk about you and Podcasthon and really life in general. Welcome, Jeremie Mani, to the show. It's such a treat to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. That's my pleasure.
First, who is Jeremie Mani in simply one sentence?
Well, not an easy question, but I'm just a former entrepreneur who had some successes and some experience, and I want to use this experience now to raise awareness on the maximum number of charities, and that's pretty much everything.
Beautiful. So now let's start and really introduce what Podcasthon is and really aims to do, and then also what really made you start Podcasthon in the first place.
So you're right. I will start by explaining this concept, and then we can deep dive into the origin of the concept if you like. We can elaborate on this. So the concept is quite simple, yet somehow powerful. The idea there is to convince as many value-driven podcasters as we can to dedicate one episode of their show to a charity of their choice. And the specificity is to do it in a coordinated way. That would mean doing that all together in March, during the span of 7 days, mid-March. So that mid-March, we will have a massive wave of inspiring content, audio contents. And the main objective there is to raise awareness on charities, because those podcasters will have a choice to select any charities they like, one they care about. And so that would mean over 1,000 podcasters, meaning as many charities in a kind of big show during 1 week with a lot of inspiring stories. So there is no money at stake. We don't ask for donation. I mean, you can, but that's completely optional. It's really about a question of awareness, because we do believe that podcasting is a great medium to convey emotions. Your podcasters are great storytellers. And on the other hand, all those charities, they desperately need to connect with a larger audience, for example, your audience. So ideally, there would be a match.
It's really beautiful what you're doing. And it also really tells the story of a lot of entrepreneurs who ultimately go into this sphere of really doing good in the world and try to impact as many lives as possible in doing good. So thank you so much for your efforts. But I want to go a little bit back and talk a little bit about you first and foremost, about your journey and really what made you become an entrepreneur, and walk us really through about when you started and you had this initial idea that you want to go into the world of the World Wide Web, which was back then something really kind of Wild West. No one really knew where it will be going. So please walk us through, and then also give us some example that somehow alluded to your quality of being and becoming successful entrepreneur, specifically when it comes to your childhood.
Right. So it all started in 1999, so long ago. I feel like a dinosaur. I'm 48 actually, and I was at that time an average student in marketing in a business school in France, and I was fortunate to be chosen to attend one semester in Michigan University in Ann Arbor. So end of 1999, and you really have to understand, or maybe for your audience that may be younger than me, that it was a crazy period, meaning that was the early days of the internet with a lot of .coms on TV, on billboards. It was really something new. And I mean, I was surrounded by very smart students from all over the world. And at the end of the day, at the end of the class, they would gather in small groups, talk about business plan and startups. I didn't even know what was a startup and what was a business plan. I was really intrigued. And for the anecdotes, it's also where I first read about this crazy word, Wi-Fi. It took me days to understand what is Wi-Fi, because for me, internet was, a computer, and you plug it to something, and then you have access to information. But how could it be cableless, wireless? Well, so I'm just saying that in a funny way, just for your audience to understand, it was really, really the beginning of a lot of things. And for me, it was kind of revolution, not just for me, for everyone. It was kind of revolution. And I discovered that I may have an entrepreneurial mindset, but I wanted to be part of this revolution, for sure. I mean, at that time, you don't dream about making money or whatever else, succeeding with your company. You're just dreaming of being part of this something, with the sheer wave of enthusiasm all around. So back in France, early 2000, very beginning of 2000, I had some friends and partners, co-founders. We were 5 smart guys too, and we decided to have a shot and try to launch a company. It was a kind of agency dedicated to email marketing. And once again, email marketing was very, very at the early stages at that time. So there was a lot of things to do. We kind of became a European leader in this industry. So we had an opportunity to, I make it quick, but to sell this company in 2007, and then stayed a few longer till 2 years later. But it was kind of a success. Not that easy. The first year were a bit complicated, but it was a great period to be, experiencing this revolution. At 33, I was fortunate to sell this company. So I had some asset. I could buy a house. I could buy another company and start again for 10 other years with Netino. And Netino is a content moderation company. So you may not know what is content moderation. It's a kind of subcategory of community management. So we're talking about the web 2.0, sorry. The basic concept is to, handle all user-generated content. So whenever an internaut writes something below an article of media, for example, or published an ad on a classified website, there's a need to check if everything is respectful of the guidelines. And if not, you need to delete this or hide it. So this is what content moderation is. It takes some automation with a lot of machine learning and technology, but also a lot of humans. And we were quite successful also in this venture. So I could sell it. I could sell the company just before the COVID. So I was very lucky because it was perfect timing. And I had this plan to move to Canada with my spouse and my 3 kids. We wanted to change life. We wanted to experience something else. I mean, that's when you have teenagers, you want to offer them a different perspective on what is life. So it was perfect timing to, just change life. So as you said, I kept on working with Web Canada for 3 years, but now I'm completely volunteering my time to this Podcasthon initiative.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love that. And thank you so much for also taking this responsibility and to have actually 3 kids. To me, I always tell, my kids, not my kids, but the kids I teach, I tell always them that the parents are really my heroes because, there's no more important job than being a responsible parent and taking on this responsibility of really parenting. It's just huge, especially given, what we go through. And so thank you so much for this. So I don't take this for granted at all, given the circumstances, especially. So that is really wonderful. So what I also really like is just this whole world now with podcasts. And it seems like there's, when COVID hit, there were just like, it was just exploding, right? And so how did you experience this explosion of podcasts, of new medias? It almost seems that now we really live in a different information age. So it's not really cliche anymore to say that legacy media is not really as critical anymore. It's almost forgotten now, especially when it comes to the new generations. There's still some people, I would say 50 onwards, or maybe 60 onwards, who are still, watching cable TV. But when I see it with my friends, and I'm 38, for example, everything I consume now is, for example, through podcasts. Why? Because that is just this genuinity. It's genuine. It's authentic. You can truly listen to someone's perspective. For example, the Ukraine war and all these different things that are going on. There you really get a sound perspective of both sides.
Totally.
And you ask yourself when you listen to, CNN or Fox News or these legacy media, it's just so biased. And I always ask myself, like, we are always talking about China, the propaganda of China, of Russia, but the propaganda that is also propagated here in the Western world, it's just immense. I find it astonishing, how naive to some extent we consume media, or at least the legacy media wants us to think we should think about certain issues. So please dive into it, what you think, what it means to you, and why you really thought like, yes, I want to dedicate my time. And again, volunteering your time to the podcast world and doing such a great initiative.
Well, so talking about podcasts, I mean, I do agree. This is a great medium, very mature now. There's a great diversity, a vast array of subjects that you can listen to. And what I personally like is interviews, because you take time to have a nuanced speech, to dive deeper into subjects. I love those podcasts with that we will listen during more than 2 hours, 3 hours. Last time I was in a plane and I was listening for a podcast during 4 hours and a half. And I love it because it was kind of debate. And I feel like I was part of the same room as the two debaters and with the interview, it was Joe Rogan, actually. Joe Rogan with two people, two guests. And I feel like I was in the same room, with my headphones. And I was just listening to the opinion on the one side and the other side. And I love that. So there's so many subjects that you can find through that. And you can take time. And I love the fact that there's no images most of the time. Well, you can watch that on YouTube for many of them. But personally, I prefer the full 100% audio because you just focus on what is said and not on the some other things that might take your attention. So that's what I like, and I found out that most podcasters are value driven because they're passionate about what they're doing. For many of them, they don't make money out of that. So that's really a passionate endeavor. Um, and well, moving to Podcasthon, that's a charity event. It's a non-profit event, and there's a great combo when you're mixing up passion and charity. Um, so as you understood, the idea there is to convince podcasters to invite a representative of a charity at the mic and have a great conversation about the challenges they are facing. And most of the time, because that will be, I haven't said that already, that will be the third edition. Actually, the first in English, but the first two editions were in French only. So somehow we fine-tuned the formula. Like I can testify that that led to that generated great episodes because it comes from their hearts. And those podcasters are from all those who I could talk to. They are passionate and they have a great heart. So I love this industry, I love this media, and I love the people behind. So when because we are two co-founders, and I have this opportunity to name Yves Delnat with the other co-founder. We wanted to do something. We were asking ourselves what could be a charity event in the podcasting world, which is still a fast growing industry, fast growing media. And then we came up with this idea, very simple, to just coordinate the effort. And we were really surprised by the number of podcasters who decided to participate for the first edition, 300, starting from scratch. It was quite a nice achievement. And then 400 for the second edition with many partners. So we kind of structured it. And now we are over 1,000 now, already registered, and there's still time before the event. So probably we will end up with, I don't know, 1,500 or something like that from at least 30 countries. We already have 30 different countries represented. So that's I love that. I love that. Anytime I have the opportunity to talk to a podcaster to explain the concept, I love the feedback that I have and the mindset of those people. I mean, and I respect that because I wouldn't be able to be to lead a show like a podcast show, because that's something it talks a lot of qualities that I don't have. So yeah, main reason why we wanted to have a shot with this charity event in the podcasting world, and we don't regret, because I mean, I let your audience decide and have his or her opinion, but your listeners to have one opinion, but it's a bit different from any other charity event, because we are not talking about raising money. It's really about raising awareness. And there's probably nothing better than podcasting as a media to convey emotion. And that's what it takes, to convey those messages for charities.
When did you realize that you are someone who is mostly driven by your values? Because that takes a lot of maturity. And I always think about like this. If you have certain values that ultimately guide your behavior, and then your behavior support your goals, and your goals support your mission, and your mission support really your vision that you have, whether it's just simply just living a loving, wonderful life and making in one way or another an impact, it really changes, someone's life. So how did you figure out that, hey, I have to live a life that is based on my values? When it occurred to you that this is the best way of living a happy and wonderful life?
It was quite recent, and you won't be surprised, but it happened probably during the COVID period. That's a period during which many of us decided to change lives or do things differently. And I have to admit, during my 21st years of entrepreneur, I was quite self-centered. I mean, as many entrepreneurs, you think about yourself, your company, your clients, your staff, your shareholders, your family, but that's pretty much everything. And you want to grow. So I won't tell you that I was value-driven all my life and that it was just a natural thing for me. It happens quite recently. And as I said, I was fortunate to sell the second company just before COVID. And then you have well, you have a choice. Do you want to start a third company, or do you want to do something else? And I have to admit, I have the chance not to have too many frustrations. I mean, I don't have watches. I don't like fancy cars. I don't need a second house in any kind of fancy island. I don't like that, and I don't care about that. So I've I mean, I have enough money for my needs, so I'm not motivated to make more money by creating a third company, and it's a lot of work. But I have a lot of energy. I mean, and I wanted to do a lot of things, so it was quite a natural decision to channel this energy into a non-profit organization, and I was completely unable to decide which cause I wanted to support. So that's how with Eve that I met during this period, we decided to come up with a concept that would help charities instead of doing something very specific about one cause or another one. And then that led us to S3E first, kind of altruistic social network, which was a kind of a disaster, a failure. No, I mean, I'm too harsh with myself. There was some successes in terms of images. We got a lot of media coverage, but we wanted to create to counterbalance the fake news and the hate speech of social networks, usual traditional social networks, with a new one targeting altruistic people. And it was probably a naive approach, and we were aware of that, but we wanted to try it. So it was not a success, let's say, but that led us after a pivotal approach to Podcasthon, and we're fully satisfied and pleased by the way this initiative is growing.
There's so many points actually you mentioned, and I will just backtrack a little bit in terms of what you actually just said, that you were pretty self-centered. But I also have to say, and I'm not playing your advocate. Obviously, you don't need an advocate, but it's also a fact that if you want to be successful, especially as an entrepreneur, you have to be really, really committed. You have to be very, very focused. You have to be very, very determined. And so there is no way of not being, to some extent, self-centered. And I think what's most beautiful is, in your case, and I think that's for most entrepreneurs, people who make billions ultimately, Bill Gates and all these people like Elon Musk or whatever. I mean, ultimately, there is always this awakening that, yes, there is more than just the money. So you want to give something back. And I think, so there is nothing, bad there. I think it's just wonderful, because it's also people like you who really inspire generations like myself to do something and then give back, right? Because it's always give and take somehow. And that's beautiful. And it just speaks for yourself, because what I always take issue is that people always think like, well, these people are just lucky, but most of the time it's just incredible dedication. There's so much hours, days that you are just in the dark and you feel like giving up because no one really believes in you or cares whatever you do, and you keep going. And I think that's really where the growth is. And ultimately, it's all about the process. And that's so beautiful. And the fact that you have, and again, I mentioned this again, you have 3 kids. And I'm kind of also wondering, how did you actually meet your wife? Because that's also a big thing, right? Because if you're so focused on entrepreneurship, it takes so much time. So actually also balancing and having ultimately a family is a huge thing. So how did you do that?
Well, we just celebrated our 20 years anniversary a few days ago. So we made a bit more than 20 years ago. I was just starting my first company. So maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years later after the start of the company. So we met in 2003 or something like that. So random. That's the beauty of life, we were young and well, even though you work hard, Saturday evening you want to go out and meet people. So she was a friend of a friend, and that's how we met. So it's very, very basic and simple answer. But that's
Beautiful.
true. I mean, what you're saying behind an entrepreneur, you need a spouse, and actually, my wife took care of the kids, and she did that in a great way. And I mean, I appreciate that because, well, it's true that when you're working hard, you need to be complete. You have a freedom of mind, and you need to know that everything is running properly at home and with your kids. And I mean, I love my three kids; they are well educated, so everything is fine. We are lucky with that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's it takes a lot. I mean, having a family, it's in and of itself an entrepreneurial, it's an enterprise, right? And to me, it's always like this. And I'm curious what you're saying about that. But it's evolution, right? Because we grew up in small tribes and we were hunter and gatherers, and the men were out hunting and and bringing it back. So we were basically, to some extent, we have this entrepreneurial gene in us already. And so therefore, I also think sometimes that it's actually huge that a lot of people can work also in a corporate environment, which is very restrained, right, in terms of your creativity. So how do you think that? So do you think like that is also very hard? So how do you see and compare the two, if we can somehow compare them at all?
So I'm not sure I get your question. What do you want me to compare exactly?
You
Family
know,
life and entrepreneurship?
exactly. So, basically, like having a family is like an enter- enterprise, right? And so, but I was also a little
Yeah,
bit
right.
going into,
Oh, yeah. I'm I don't know if I'm legit to give advices on that. I was kind of a hard work dad. So, no, I mean, I was there, but there but not there. Physically there, but with your mind doing something else for a long time. It's different now that I'm living in Montreal because I have much more time for them. But they are grown up for at least two of them. So that's different. But sure, I mean, you need to spend time. You need to, we always talk about quality time, but that's a wrong concept. You just need, your kids need time. They don't need quality time. They need time. They need you to be there even for small and insignificant things. Um, so that's a legend saying, well, I'm not always there, but when I'm there, I'm having a lot of quality time with them. I'm always hearing that. And if I were to do it again, probably I would try to make more room in my life for that, um, because you can do it. I mean, there are a lot of things that you do as an entrepreneur. You can delegate, and then you will have more time, and then you're much more balanced also. And you need that. You need to be in balance because um, in a venture like this, I mean, for me, it was two times 10 years. It's a long period. It's more than a marathon. It takes a lot of energy on the long run. So you can't sacrifice as important things as family and your personal life. So you need to find a good balance. You need to do sports too. I mean, you need to act like an athlete. You need to take care about yourself, about your circle, first circle which is family, and I did the second circle with friends too, and also your company. So that's not easy. It depends on your on many things, but everyone has to find his own way, his own recipe. But that's very important. Yeah, please don't sacrifice that.
yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I didn't really want to go into that, but it's actually to Ellen Langer also. She's at Harvard and she wrote a book. It's called The Power of Mindful Learning. And at the very first pages, she says like the crisis that we have right now is that parents don't have time for the kids anymore. And kids, the only gift that you can give them is your time. However, I want to be very, very clear here that to me, every adversity has its equal opportunity. So I think the way you did it, and you had an amazing wife, amazing mother, I imagine, I just perfectly balanced. And ultimately, I think it turned out being, great. So I think that there's so many different ways of actually doing it. But the most important part is always, and I'm saying that if you have a family, if you're a couple, you got to make sure that you guys really understand each other and really model this and really be really the change that you want to see in the world in front of your kids. That's so important. I was recently talking to a friend of mine. Actually, it was in Montreal, and so I met her. We were like talking in the park. It was close to Darling. I don't know if you know the bar Darling. It's called Darling in Montreal. It's a
Not too
beautiful
sure.
bar. I
No.
just love it. We were just basically supposed to go and having a drink there, but we were just chatting. And so I told her, my only fear that I have basically is that my parents will be separated or will get a divorce. Even up to today, actually, that's still the only fear actually I have. And I was always not really sure what it is, but at some point, I think in my early 30s, I really figured that is actually really my biggest fear. And then she told me, she's like, that's kind of funny because all my European friends tell me the same thing, but I have never heard it from my European friends because she is from Asia. So it was very interesting. So that's
Okay.
why I always find this really so important. So that's why I'm sharing it.
No, you're right. I mean, that's clearly very important, and you're right to say that when you're in a couple, I mean, I was an entrepreneur, and you need to have the full approval of your spouse, your partner, when you're doing that, because it has a lot of implication for her, at least for my wife, could be for your husband, for whoever else is partnering with you. Um, yeah, there's a lot of consequences for him or for her, and you need to, have a straightforward conversation and be sure that you're sharing all your doubts, your stress. You're not always there for a lot of things. So yeah, it's a teamwork.
And it really comes true because I really feel like you are such a balanced person and you're really, really on purpose what you're doing. And it really, the way you talk about your wife and just everything, it really seems that you are a role model to really look up to, because I think the most important enterprise is ultimately being the best spouse, in the world, at least that's what my values are. And I think this is just so beautiful if you have someone who somehow you can share your thoughts, your worries.
Exactly. Exactly. And if I were a native English speaker, probably I will find some even more subtlety to express. I love my wife, and I acknowledge the fact that she was precious, and she is precious in everything that I'm doing. So yeah, that's important to say it.
You mentioned a podcast, and I just kind of want to share my thoughts. And please, I want to have your thoughts on that. I always watch podcasts on YouTube, so I can actually see also the people. And
Okay.
I was asking
Yeah.
myself, what is it? Because you mentioned that you actually do it, you prefer just listening to it. So I just want to kind of figure out, what is it? Why is it that I prefer also the images and you are more about listening? So I just want to kind of uh, get a feel and kind of to understand myself a little bit more. What do you think is it that I am more inclined to also have pictures, you know?
I kind of changed my mind about that. At least it's a working process. At first, I would have said that our podcast is audio, 100% audio, and whenever you introduce a camera, people are changing their state of mind, are looking at their face on the screen, and they may say things differently or behave differently. That's on the one hand. But someone told me recently that what he likes about watching a podcast through YouTube, for example, is that you can have some um, different kind of information. And for example, I was trying to imagine what would be this debate I was mentioning that lasted for an hour and a half. What would be the benefit of watching it instead of listening to it? And I imagine that I may see some surprises at the face of people whenever the opponent was saying something, or maybe you can have some people that are embarrassed. I mean, it adds some information, some non-verbal information to the debate that might be interesting also. So, well, that's a personal thing because I like audio. I can focus on doing that, and also because I love listening to podcasts when I'm running or doing something like that. Most of the time when I'm running, that's more complicated when you need to watch. But I think there is some advantages to watch certain podcasts in certain circumstances. So I don't have any religion about that. It's really up to you to decide. But yeah, in certain circumstances, I think it's adding some value. It might sound strange because yeah, I'm a kind of dinosaur, and for me, podcast was audio only. But I'm kind of changing my mind.
It's so interesting, and obviously, because I came really into this world very, very late, actually. I didn't even listen to Joe Rogan, for example. Maybe I started listening to him occasionally, maybe 2 years ago. I was never really into kind of this world. I was more about kind of reading a book, which I still do. I really enjoy. But more and more, I just love the authenticity. And to me, what really happened is, especially in this space, is that you really, I think you get a good glimpse on who the people really are. And it's really authentic. And I think that's, to me, it's so nourishing. And that's why I would also say that, for example, when it comes to the US election, and I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, I have both friends. I have no issues
I'm
whatsoever.
not an American
to
citizen
me,
anyway.
and for me, it's always like, you know what, I don't care. You can support this person or this person. I want to know who you truly are. And I judge a person based not on what he's saying, but actually what he's actually doing, and how he treats other people and so on and so forth. But there too, it was obvious to me that one candidate, he was very authentic, even though he is very inappropriate in so many circumstances. As a teacher, for example, I would say, wow, this is really inappropriate because, you don't want your kid to model such behavior. On the other hand, I will give credit to this person and say, you know what, at least this person is authentic. At least this person talks with you and with a journalist basically the same thing. It's, more or less locker room talk. It's never really filtered. And I think more and more what really helps also at podcasts is people are more and more, again, looking for really authenticity, because now we are in a digital age, which is more and more, it's kind of paradoxical, right? It's, on one hand, it's so easy to connect, but on the other hand, it's so hard to actually connect deeply with people. And that's what we are looking for. Everyone, really, what we're looking for is to have deep connections. Like, I would even make the argument that someone who is really, really works hard, whether he wants to found an amazing company as you did and so on and so forth, underneath really is this very drive to ultimately deeply connect with the very person that you want to commit yourself your whole life to, and to find this. And this somehow helps to do so, because obviously it is competition, and you also want to some extent show that you have some competency, right? That you can actually handle your life, and that you don't just follow into any trap that comes your way. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I find it, I have a big heart for especially younger generations. I still grew up, I was all the time playing in the woods, Indian and cowboys. Today you don't say this anymore, but that's how it was, right? And so it was amazing. So, my first game was like Nintendo or whatever, and my first cell phone was like a Nokia, and it was just beautiful. And I didn't have the challenges that now most young people have, and even adults. The thing is that everyone knows, for example, what we should eat, right?
Exactly.
Everyone knows what's healthy, but how many people actually walk the talk, can actually do it? It really takes incredible commitment and dedication, and also you need to know the tools and strategies. And you were mentioning something very important, and I want to come back to this. You said, you know what, I work like for every company basically 10 years. And I truly believe if you want to get at something really, really good, you need 10 years, full dedication. And then if
It
you're
takes time.
still
It takes
not,
time.
it's exactly, if you're still not, then it's maybe not meant for you. But I think that's just, I think, the road that we have to
It's like
take.
gardening, it's like gardening. You can't hurry nature. It takes time to plant a seed, and you have to wait. Okay, you pour water, you need sun, but it takes time, and you can't speed up the process of having a nice flower or any kind of plant or something like that. So when you understand that, you know that it takes time to grow a company. It takes time for an initiative for Podcasthon, like to grow. We may reach over 1,000 podcasters. But if you compare with the number of podcasts everywhere in the world, that's very tiny part of it. So there's room for many, many more. And it's everything. It's always the same. So in current world, everything is. I mean, even videos are 30-second videos, and then you move to another one, and another one, and you can't remind anything. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't even remember what you've watched. Um, well, that's definitely not my generation. That's one of my kids for sure. I'm trying to teach them to showcase the fact that you need time. And you were mentioning reading books. That's important because you take time. I mean, even in a book, some pages might be less interesting than others, but that's a um, global piece of art, a global thing that you need to read, and that's at the end of the reading that you might have a conclusion about what is interesting or not. Because sometimes it takes some lower content, to move to a very interesting concept. But if you don't explain the background and what is behind and how you arrive to this point, well, you go directly to the point, but you don't get exactly the concept because it was too fast. You need this time. So yeah, you're right. Podcast is, I mean, there's something very specific about podcast. You take the time that you want. I mean, we're having this conversation. It could last 3 hours if you decide. I mean, after that, that would be your audience to decide if they want to dedicate 3 hours of their time to listen to this conversation. But I mean, there is nothing force you to stop after 1 hour. And I can see that with podcasts, some episodes are lasting 45 minutes or 30 minutes and some other 1 hour and a half because you're completely free. That's your show. You do whatever you like. And some conversation might take more time to elaborate on a specific subject. Some other are quite clear. And after 50 minutes, that's okay. You don't need more. Um, while on YouTube, it's sometimes more structured when there's a lot of data saying that the concentration of youngsters is less than 20 minutes. So you should, if you want to succeed, you should focus on videos that won't last more than 15 minutes. And that's a pity. For sure, you will find counter examples, but most of them are very short. Okay, we are zapping, and zapping. Okay, that's life. I mean, I won't act as a dinosaur and saying that's a pity, but with podcasts, at least you can decide to be back. That's funny how you can decide to be back to 3 hour listening. I mean, it used to exist on TV, those 3 hours show in the 70s. And now we're back with that. It's like fashion sometimes, Fashion is a kind of circle. It's just interesting to see that many successful podcasters have shows that may last episode that may last more than 3 hours, and that's fine. And they have huge audiences, so there's a need for that, and probably that's because people are expecting this kind of nuanced speech, taking time to elaborate, taking time to converse, to exchange opinions, to debate, and I mean, personally, that's what I love.
Of course, I mean, it will be so much more alive if we will be able to actually do it in person. And I'm sure I will do it one day with you in Montreal. Hopefully, I make sure
Hopefully.
that you can do it, because obviously that's a whole other level, and it's just, you can really feel
Yeah,
the
I'm
person,
convinced about that.
you know.
True.
And that's also one thing.
True.
It's really what I saw, for example, in North America. Usually, you see like people are going in a restaurant, they eat 45 minutes and they go out. I'm like, but that's crazy. I'm like, because in our European culture, especially, France, Portugal, Spain, Germany, Switzerland, Austria. So, and I can't talk for all of them, but most of the time it's really the table. And that's really, we sit there for hours, just, having, eating and talking and drinking. And it's just so beautiful. And that's why you were mentioning about those kind of TV series. It brings people together. There is something that just people, we are just genetically wired to be with one another, to spend time and feel each other. It's just so different, even though I really enjoy, this is a wonderful conversation, and I really love for, for what you stand for, and you're just great, in doing the conversation.
Thank
But
you.
if you are actually, meeting, one-on-one, it's even more profound, because you get so much more the subtle messages that you can actually pick up, that you can't necessarily pick up while doing in front of the screen.
Exactly. I do agree with that. That's for sure. The energy is not the same. But yeah, on the other hand, we would probably never met. And thanks to Zoom and Riverside and all those great tools. And by the way, Riverside is a great partner of the podcast, and so I'm happy to name them. Thanks to those tools, we have opportunities to exchange, to meet somehow, even though it's a bit frustrating not to shake hands. But yeah, we need to appreciate that too. So it would be a pity if you stay behind your screen all day long, but that's great, to connect. And I can take my personal experience with this podcast on. I was mentioning that we currently have podcasters from 30 different countries, and anytime podcaster register, he or she will receive an automated email explaining all details, the guidelines, a lot of things, but also Calendly, as those online calendars, and that's mine. And I encourage them to pick up a slot, 15 minutes most of the time, just to get to know each other. There's a tiny part of people who do that, but out of 1,000, probably I already spoke to 100, okay, 100 times 15 minutes. And those people are coming from Australia, from Nigeria, from different places in Canada. I'm living in Canada, but from New Brunswick, from British Columbia, and also from unexpected countries everywhere in the world. And I do love that. That's you can see different personalities. You can see great people. I mean, it's not a question of audience. Sometimes you realize those people are followed by, I don't know, 50,000 people on LinkedIn, and you're having a conversation with them. So probably they are interesting. I mean, most of the time they wrote books or things like that. You want to dig what is behind the screen and what is present. You're always frustrated not just to spend 15 minutes, but on the other hand, that's great to have this experience of talking to people coming from so many different countries with the same passion. And if you think about that, humanity is great for that. I mean, we are just sharing a concept, very simple concept. It takes 30 seconds to explain what is this podcast about. And you have people from all around the world who say, okay, I don't know you. I've never heard about this podcast on whatsoever it is, but I like the idea. I like the concept, so count me in. Wow, I do love that. And that's thanks to those technologies. So for sure, in an ideal world, I would go everywhere. In Australia, in Nigeria, I would shake hands with everyone. But we need to. Well, that wouldn't be good for the planet anyway. Yeah, let's make it through Riverside and Zoom, and that's not that bad.
I fully agree with you. I mean, it's just astonishing now, the technology, the software that we have available, and you can just meet like with you easily. You're in Montreal, I'm in Costa Rica right now, and we can just have a wonderful conversation. So, and that's why I'm so grateful for the life actually we have. We have a lot of challenges, of course, but at the same time, science and everything, it just goes exponential. And I truly believe that climate change, these are, of course, there's social issues, of course, but these are scientific problems that can be solved scientifically. I'm truly, truly convinced. And of course, there needs a political will, but I think there's no way that we won't ultimately solve it. I'm maybe I'm a little bit naive, but I'm just too optimistic. But when I just look at what we have created, how far we came from, like the humanity, just in and of itself, it's mind blowing, and it's just beautiful how we can connect. And I think what I really like to what you're doing with Podcasthon is really helping other podcasters really, also coming together. As you said, there's so many interesting people who share the mission that you have, and also of all tools, right? And so I really like that, and I want to dive a little bit more deeply into it, because of course every opportunity has its equal adversity. And so you come with this concept of altruism, right? Especially when it comes to social media. So how do you think this can somehow help in order to make it a better, a more life-giving place? Because of course, there are always bad actors, and that's what we see all the time. I mean, 90%, I would say, are very decent human beings, okay? So there's basically 5% of each side who are just extreme, who just basically poison this space. So what would you suggest, or what do you think like is the biggest challenges right now that the podcast world faces, and social media platforms in general?
I mean, I agree with you. Most people, a very large majority of people, are like-minded and might be altruistic and are not self-centered. The thing is, you are always putting more intention into two people fighting instead of 100 people collaborating. It's more spectacular. It's generating more stress for everyone, including you. Uh, that's the way we are. We are a bit like that. That our brain is like that. So we need to be aware of that, and it takes an effort to focus more on the positive side of things instead of the negative. Those social networks. I mean, I could see the rise, the rise of social networks. I was there. I was a professional at that time, and I was deeply convinced that it was a positive thing, that it would be good to share ideas and concept and knowledge. That's the theme of your podcast, knowledge. You would share that through social networks. You would connect with people. I still believe there's a lot of very positive things on social networks, but we have to admit that fake news are winning, that hate speech is winning the war. And I'm concerned about that. I don't have any solution. I would love to have one, but I don't know. So we just need to, I hope next generation will be more mature and will understand that better, the way those algorithms are working, and will divert from negative content to put more effort on trying to search for positive things. Let's be optimistic. Might be the case. We don't have this problem with podcast industry, I guess, because I mean, this is not a spectacular medium. This is more a profound medium in which you take time to explain things. So it's somehow it's. I mean, it's so different from the snacking content that you can find on those social networks. It's the contrary actually of the snacking content of social networks. So let's put podcast aside. But when we talk about social networks, yeah, it's really up to us individually to educate ourselves and our child to use those tools differently, very differently. Where we can't rely on TikTok and Instagram to do that properly for us. We need to take some distance with the algorithm, and it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, it's so true. I fully agree. And I think it's also to some extent, I think one of the issues too, to me, is that obviously it's always really hard because you are French and you are well aware of the French Revolution and what it actually means, and what actually freedom of speech means, the importance of it, and it's really hard to find a balance here, and to not you going from one extreme to another, and to really find a healthy middle way. And one thing I always say is that, first and foremost, it's an individual's responsibility to start becoming aware of potential consequences it can have in terms of your health. I think, we have all these data available. We know how unhealthy social media can be if it's used wrongly. For example, what's happening, for example, on TikTok and all these shorts, that's just like the biggest waste of someone's life if you constantly swipe these short videos. And I'm not saying that you should never ever listen to it, but you should build into your daily routine a mechanism where you can allow yourself to have those kind of short content. So you are very, very intentional, because every business wants ultimately your attention, right? The attention ultimately is what really makes money, especially in the online platform. And the science and the technology that is built into, you mentioned, into this algorithm, are just impossible. It's impossible to ultimately to master them if you are not very, very intentional, and you build in
It's
to your
like
daily.
yeah, you're totally right. I mean, for me, it's like those all you can eat buffet. If it's all you can eat junk foods, well, I'm not saying it's not good. It's not good for the tasty. You feel good, but it's not good for your health. And so that's up to you to decide not to eat it, or maybe just once from time to time. That's really takes time. It takes some education, and it takes time to realize that it's not good for you. So it's there, it's free. Um, it's you can have it at hand, but well, it's not a reason why you should consume it. So yeah, those social networks, they have some very tasty things and healthy food into it sometimes, but a lot of junk food too. So well, that's up to you to decide what is good for you or not.
Yeah, it's so important. I just want to really reiterate what you were saying. It's just, it's all about moderation. You have to know if you eat junk food, it doesn't mean that you can never ever eat junk food, but you have to know that it has ultimately consequences, and consequences can really be severe. And just given the fact that young people obviously grow up with this technology, and oftentimes I hear, well, young people are savvy with technology or social media. And I'm like, well, I don't know, but that can be because I don't know anyone who is actually savvy when it comes to handling technology and this powerful technology. What do you think about that?
I mean, I'm definitely convinced that technology is great. I'm a bit more concerned about the evolution of AI, but that's another subject. But it's anything. I mean, it takes moderation for everything, for food, for even for sport. I mean, when you're practicing too much sport, you can hurt yourself, or it's not very good for your social life and things like that. So I'm um, I'm a profound believer in moderation for everything, including technology. It's there. Um, it's everywhere around us, and there's a lot of very positive things that are coming with it. But that's so hard, to have some moderate consumption of it. And there's an issue when you're not opening any book because you're too focused on your smartphone. But anyone now should realize that. I mean, there's so much information and education about that. I heard that Australia might modify the law so that any people younger than 16 won't have the right to create an account on social networks. Don't know will they manage to do that. That's another subject. But it shows that people are evolving, that mindset is evolving, mentality are evolving about that. And it's not just social networks, Netflix too. I mean, Netflix is taking so much of your attention. I love Netflix. I mean, there's a lot of documentary and many, many, very many movies are very, very interesting, but wow, you can't spend more than, well, I won't give a figure because it's up to everyone to decide. But if you're spending too much time behind the screen, wow, that's a catastrophe. So I'm not around to say to people, well, you should do that or not to do that. I'm just saying, find balance. Yeah, find balance in everything you're doing. And that's probably one of the best advice I can give because that's not a popular one. But most of the time, that's a really efficient one.
Very good. I love that. Just quickly to your marathon, you are also doing marathon and you play tennis, and I actually also love both of it. So, what made you start marathon? Is this something that you started recently, or is this something that you always have done?
No, actually, it was long ago. It was 10 or 15 years ago. And I'm not too sure I would be able to do that. I'm running half marathon, so it's easier now. But yeah, that's I will turn 50 in the next within the next 2 years, and I guess one of my objectives may be to try to do another marathon and maybe to beat my record. So it will be a nice challenge. So, but there's no secret, you know. We were talking about taking time, and that's exactly that with running. I mean, if you want to make progress, you need to run slowly, and that's really the real advice. You need to run slowly for hours, and then at least 70% of your time, you need to run slowly to make progress. That's counterintuitive. And that's exactly what we are saying about gardening, for example, you know. So yeah, taking your time sometimes is a very positive thing, including in sports. And I'm playing tennis every week, and I love that. It's it's a game. It's nice to. It's also a social moment because you're having fun with from friends. So yeah, that's two different sports. Um, Ideally, I would be a player of soccer and things like that because I love the fact that you're surrounded with many partners, but I'm not good at it. So at least when you're playing tennis and you're not good at all, well, the only one you can blame is yourself. So that's okay. Um, that's probably why I'm playing tennis and not something else.
I love soccer too, and now also I feel too old actually to play soccer because of injuries and stuff. It's just like, but I love to watch it, and obviously France is great in soccer. I love the player. I always was actually cheering for the French team, and so yeah, great. But I just want to come back and just kind of to wrap it up. I'm curious about where do you see podcast and its role when it comes to the future of media, such as news and content creation, but also entertainment.
Oh, I'm not that specialist. I'm not into this industry for long. I haven't been for long, and I'm just running a nonprofit initiative on podcast. So I don't know what would be the value of my opinion. I have to be completely transparent with you about that. I do believe, and I make it short for the reason I just said. I do believe that it has a place somewhere among the other. It doesn't have to replace anything. It has a place, and that's a good thing if it's keep on growing. Well, you will never heard from me saying that's the only medium that's worth spending time on, and then you should stop listening to radio and move to podcast. Well, there's a lot of things on radio that are great. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy that podcast is evolving, and happy that it is existing too. But once again, balance. So if you were to spend all your life listening to podcasts, I'm not sure it would be positive. So yeah, pick up the one you like, some episodes from time to time, and don't forget to do all those things. But it's true that's probably one of the only media that you can do or consume while doing something else. And I was mentioning running, for example. So if I were to prepare for a marathon, I would have a lot of time to listen to podcasts. So I'm happy that it's existing. But I could listen to radio at the same time. So it's just a choice. Probably I will do both.
Thank you so much for sharing this last question. What makes you feel alive?
That's a very difficult question, but definitely, I love the energy behind this podcast. The fact that and I already said it earlier, but I may elaborate on that. The fact that you're getting connected by someone you never met, you will probably never shake hand because he or she is living somewhere else in Australia, for example, because it's far away from where I am. And in 5 minutes, we kind of agree that she or he will participate to this podcast, and meaning spending time to invite a charity and respect your rules and bring and come with the other to participate to that. Wow, I love that. I mean, because there's nothing to gain. I mean, it's free, but it doesn't. I mean, it's you don't expect anything from that. You're just doing it because you think it's good, and the fact that we are gathering, bringing together so many people from different places with the same goal. I do love that. I do love that. And yeah, it's a great energy. That's a great feeling, and yeah, probably that fuels my energy for the day, for the weeks to come too.
Jeremie, Mani, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm being truly a gift to myself and really to the world. And with your initiative, Podcasthon.com. So I really invite everyone. I will put the link below to go on Podcasthon.com. And if you are a podcaster, sign up and really be part of this outstanding initiative and really get a chance to talk to Jeremie Mani, the co-founder of Podcasthon. So I so much appreciate you for what you stand for, what you have done, and what you continue to do, really being a blessing to the world. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. It was a great opportunity for us, the small team behind this podcast, to be featured on your show and a bit more known by your audience now. So thank you for this invitation.
Jeremie Mani. That's why knowledge matters. Make your life a masterpiece. Visit now programs.d-ykm.com. Meant to make you grow.